Hello and welcome to From the Beale End, the Burnley podcast. I'm Andrew Greaves, and with me this week I've got Paul Woodhouse in Cleveland, Ohio, and Chris Borden in Hapton, Lancashire. Well, it's started to happen. We're starting to get players in the door. Two Burnley signings so far as we record this on Thursday night. Another one imminent as well, from what we believe. But yeah, the Clarets bolstering their ranks. Max Weiss, the German goalkeeper, signing on Wednesday, and then Quilindschy Hartman. I think I pronounced that right. I've been checking YouTube videos and Wikipedia and AI pronunciations. I'm sure we'll get the proper one at some point. Signing in from Feyenoord as well. So a left back and a goalkeeper, Axel and Quilindschy, on loan. Well, no, not on loan. On a permanent to Ipswich for the last 2 years, having been out on loan at Aston Villa and Napoli from his parent club, previously Man United. Apparently down at Gawthorpe having a medical. I've just looked out my window. I can't see any helicopters or anything of the sort, but we are told by David Ormstein, usually quite a reliable source from The Athletic, that he's having his medical ahead of signing on a Bosman. I'm going to call it a Bosman rather than a free transfer because it just evokes memories of years gone by. Woody, we talked last week about kind of, players coming in and getting bodies in. I think the players are back for pre-season training on Monday. It feels like quite a good window so far, doesn't it? A couple of players coming in who look pretty decent. Tuan Beze, if I pronounce that right again, Tuan Beze. Tuan Zebe even. Zebe. Looks decent as well, doesn't he? I mean, few injury problems, but are you happy with what we've got so far?
They all do look decent. I mean, barring obviously the question marks with regards to injuries, like our friend Mr. Hartman has had a couple of ACLs, hasn't he? But he played under Arne Slot when they won the championship there. And I was watching a few of his videos, and obviously it's a fool's errand, isn't it? But I was trying to work out who he reminded me of at left back, and there's shades of Ashley Cole in there somewhere. There's definitely an intention to his ball. He's one of these that always winds up on his arse, but always gets the ball. He's got a little turn of pace, whether that's still there. But apparently he came back round about February, and the fans over in Holland were saying he hasn't quite got back to what he was, but he's still rehabilitating. Now, if we become this rehabilitation centre for partially crock footballers, and they're decent, then I think we might have something going on, because the Ipswich lad, they aren't happy to see him go, are they? They want to see another couple of years out of him. And Max Weiss is supposed to be decent to all extents and purposes. So far, so good, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. On last week's podcast, Daz was saying, Chris, that he felt the scouting department had pretty much been spot on, give or take one or two that didn't work out. But actually, the record of what works out and what doesn't work out, has been pretty good. So unlike Weiss, he's probably somebody we've never even heard of, any of us on the pod squad. But as a goalkeeper, he's only a young lad. You kind of think that scouting department, the same scouting department that found Trafford, they're probably looking for similar attributes, aren't they? And that's kind of quite exciting, isn't it? We're not going out and wholesale change, but we're picking up potentially these gems. And Hartman, of course, was linked a couple of years ago. I think summer of 2023 was the first link to Hartman. It feels like it's a really progressive way of doing transfers, doesn't it? Albeit before a ball's been kicked.
Well, exactly. I mean, I keep saying that. So you go back, you've got the tribe. Your three different categories. Your potential lads, your lads who are sort of mid-20s, and have huge potential sale value, and the ones towards the other end. I mean, I say that Twanzebe is only 27. Yeah. But he's been about. He's finally found a home in Ipswich where he's played more football than he's played anywhere else. And they've all got they're all of a great age. They all look like they've got even Twanzebe, you could say, has probably got a bit of sale potential in him. But Max White, as I'm going to call him, is you read that he's the best goalkeeper in the German second tier. Yeah. we've got the best goalkeeper in the English second tier. Well, remaining to be seen how things develop over the coming days and weeks. But if you look at all the sort of attributes that people rave about with Weiss, he's sort of coming and claiming crosses. He's exemplary by all accounts. His footwork, his passing from the back, high number of passes, high number of touches, involvements. His shot saving is decent, and everything about him. He's 6 foot plus. Everything about him screams top potential. So whether that one that's come up on the data or whether someone's spoke to someone or someone's actually seen him in action, not that we don't know, but he looks to be a very astute side. I believe Wolfsburg were keen, but he preferred the pathway underlined to him at Burnley. But Hartman again, you're looking at like Woody said, he's won the Eredivisie under Slot, so he's no dummy, is he? Injuries have kept him out for thick end of a year up to February. But I'd say Van Persie's been rotating, 3 left backs of a similar standard, and it looks like they've only let him go because he demands to start, and he's got a year left on his contract. But again, he underlaps, he overlaps. He's he can play. Well, Twanzebe can play right back.
Yeah, played at 5 as well.
Yeah, right of a back 3, back 5. Hartman can play left of a back 3. He gets up and down. He's 6 foot plus, strong in the tackle by all accounts, and what I read, he's a bit of a risk taker. He's very, technically, he said extremely high level, which is certainly required. But he's a bit of a risk taker with his he likes to play a through ball or two. But the two outfield players have a bit of pace about them, which you need at this level. They've got a bit of physicality about them. And I believe even Weiss has got turn of pace. Not that,
we don't want to see too much of that, do we?
But he's a sweeper. He's a sweeper keeper. He's very, very quick, not hesitant in any aspect. Quick off his line, makes decisions nice and early. And I think Karlsruhe fan likened him to Oliver Kahn, which is for younger viewers. He was a top goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Faint praise indeed. I think it's worth pointing out as well how bloody cheap these lads are. We aren't spunking 20 million each on them. We might get all 3 of them between 5 and 10 quite easily. It's going to wind up being pretty darn good business.
Yeah, and just touching on that, Woody, I mean, I was reading something on the Swiss Ramble, which, of course, is the kind of Substack. They look at finances, a bit like, Kieran Maguire. Look at the finances. And Burnley's kind of, financial fair play. We're not in a great position because of obviously having a couple of seasons outside of the Premier League. We obviously, spent quite a bit of money the last time we were there. So it's kind of, I think there's ways from what the Swiss Ramble was saying in terms of, we probably expect we are going to lose Trafford, which will bring in somewhere between 30 and 40 million. But obviously that won't count for this. But the kind of extended accounting periods and things like that, we can be kind of creative, shall we say, which I think a lot of clubs are being, but it's unearthing those gems twofold really. One, you're getting into markets that perhaps other teams that you expect to be around us aren't fishing in, but also you're kind of future proofing it a little bit in case next season doesn't work out how we want it to work out and you're dropping down a division. You've kind of got a bit of that sell on value, as Chris said, but you're not, you're not going down and suddenly going, right, you've got a 3-point deduction next season because you've blown more than your means to kind of try and stay up and it's not worked. It's an interesting model, isn't it? And kind of a model that's perhaps evolved a little bit under ALK over the last couple of years.
Well, at this point, it's seeming a little bit different, isn't it? It seems like since the start of, even Marcus Edwards, to a greater or lesser degree, this rehabilitation of very good potential footballers, and bringing them back into the fold. And it seems that Scott Parker's got quite a sizable hand in this, and I think he may have pushed for something along these lines, but it seems extremely smart. Granted, you can't. I don't think you'll be able to get a full team out of, crocs and ne'er-do-wells and folks who have just like fallen by the wayside a little bit at an extremely young age. But it could be a very interesting period seeing some of these players, and we've still got some to come back. The Ramses of this world, at Trezor, etc. And so there's a hell of a squad starting to develop just on the treatment sub kind of bench, and so there's going to be a sizable amount of talent that we've got that if we can keep them fit. The Bears of this world. It's going to be very interesting seeing everybody come back and see how they compete and see how they, keep it all together.
Yeah. And Chris, just touching on what Woody said there about Park having a big hand in this, and it seems that way. How much does Scott Parker, the way he's rehabilitated Edwards, arguably Jadon Anthony, who probably after that Leeds spell looked like admitted he wasn't enjoying football. How much does a player like Tuanzebe look at what he's done with those players? Hannibal, who I think he'll have probably played with at Man United. How much does that play on a player's mind when they're deciding? Because, of course, Tuanzebe, free transfer, could probably wind up anyway. They were talk of him going to Saudi Arabia where he'd have made quite a bit of money. Is Parker that kind of player that you would look at if you were in this position where you'd probably had a couple of stop-start years, you'd gone to Napoli and not got a kick, you'd gone to Stoke and been injured, not got a kick, and you suddenly been offered a chance to stay in the Premier League, stay in England, move back to North West and Park as the manager? Would that be something that you would jump at, knowing, seeing what he'd done with the likes of Edwards and Anthony?
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, it's not just what he's done with the players; it's the fact that he's had a hand in. That they weren't data signings. Parker's hand is very much in those deals. So you don't want to be just a player that I've just been signed on the data. It's nice to know you're actually wanted. The manager wants you for his squad, his team. Anthony, as we've spoken at length about, who he had him at Bournemouth. He had a tough year off the pitch at Leeds and on it as well. But he knew the potential, the talent there. Bit of an arm round the shoulder, and the same with Edwards. Great relationship from his days at Spurs. As the youth coach, he's obviously staying in touch. The player wanted to come here to play for him. Above all, sort of options that he had at the time. Like I say, we've seen so many times, these little videos and clips after promotion, after the win at Blackburn, just how they want to go through a brick wall for this fella because of how he treats them as human beings and what he gets out of them on a football pitch. So and he's one of those as well. To players of a certain age, he's not like an old time former great. He was PFA player of the year sort of 12, 13 years ago. He's quite fresh in people's minds. He's he was a top player, and all they'll see is promotion. Yeah. This fella's got something about him, hasn't
he? Yeah, definitely. And Woody, I mean, we talked at length during the last Premier League season of primarily Justin really not being able to get him on board with that Burnley side, but there was a kind of almost a mercenary element to some of that side, wasn't there? They were signing for the Premier League, they were signing to a certain extent for Vincent Kompany. They weren't necessarily signing because they felt that there was a real chance of staying up or whatever it might be. They're putting themselves in a shop window. The culture that Parker's created feels like something that players will want to buy into really quick. And you can almost see kind of, a Max Weiss or a Hartman or a Tuan Zebe kind of at the various community events, because they realise that, if you want to play for a club like Burnley Football Club, all of that comes as part of the package. That's surely got to make life easier for a footballer, especially when there is going to be massive challenges on the field next season.
Exactly. I can't imagine what the challenge is like when you just a ragtag bunch been brought together, just before the start of the season, and you're going to be up against it. You've got to have something else going on. There has to be that level of togetherness, and you have to support your manager 100%, and he has to support you 100%, and that's just to get anywhere near the third relegation spot, let alone successful. It's a huge challenge. We know how big of an effort it is, and so just being able to squeeze out that level of togetherness, and if he manages to do that, then we've got a far better crack at it than we might have done maybe a couple of years ago.
Yeah. A couple of contracts yet to be decided, or a couple of kind of futures, I guess, yet to be decided, Chris. Ashley Barnes, kind of central to a lot of that togetherness in the second half of the season. We've touched upon, and Josh Brownhill, no news on either of them. We know CJ Egan-Riley signed for Marseille, having opted not to take up the club's offer. What's your gut feeling, Chris, coming up to July 1st? I think they both become free agents. I know Josh Brownhill's in Ibiza at a kind of training camp, as a lot of these players are. So he's Steve and Hannibal.
I've done many
together.
a training camp in Ibiza, yeah.
I'd imagine the supplements you were taking and the supplements he's taking are distinctly different.
Something like that, yeah. But no, you get more concerned about Brownie the longer it goes. But, on the other side of the coin, it's still, until he signs for someone, there's still a possibility he returns. But they'll look at all these scenarios. They'll have a replacement in mind if he doesn't, and if he does come, great, because he's a great lad and he's a big part of the dressing room. I think Barnes, I thought they'd signed Barnes' contract on his backside in.
Was it tattooed it on? Yeah.
That might be the other tattoo that James Trafford talks about on the Fozcast.
I think they'd, I mean that's just a no-brainer. He's going to make a bare minimum of some appearances, you'd imagine, but he's, as we've said, he's going to, that dressing room harmony, that spirit and togetherness he's just a guy who molds people together, isn't he? And he's had a huge impact, like you've seen before, on people like Teller and Zarori and Benson, and in that promotion season, and even from being back for the last sort of 4 or 5 months of the season, massive impact in the dressing room. He'll sign a deal. What else are you going to do? With all due respect.
Yeah, exactly.
But Brownie is a concern, because I could see, like I said, Moisey's been keen on him for some while. Decore's leaving Everton. If they want a player who can be that sort of 10 or a midfielder that breaks late into the box and nicks you a goal or two, then they'll fancy Brownie on a free. But we'll see. But his agent's a Burnley lad, and hopefully he's tugging on his heartstrings a bit.
Yeah, Woody, part of me just thinks we're going to get this big, I bet you thought I was leaving kind of bit of drama. It's kind of, if you think about the reveal videos, I can almost see kind of Brownie wanting to be a part of that kind of, are we never going anywhere kind of thing. I don't know, maybe I'm being too optimistic and things like that. I agree with Chris on Barnsley. I think the love for this football club is clear to see, from the interviews at the end of last season. But Brownie would be a big miss, wouldn't he, if we were to lose him? We've talked, several hours worth of podcasts about whether he's good enough for the Premier League, but he'll probably think he's got unfinished business in the Premier League, and we will miss that dressing room influence, as Chris said, won't we?
Exactly. I think that's one of the key things, isn't it? And I think it's probably. I mean, if he's going to the likes of another Premier League club, then he's going there as a squad player. It's not quite the same influence, is it? Even we know perfectly well he'll have a slightly different role to play in the Premier League, unless he really, really has turned a corner in his late years. But it's a bit. I don't know. It would be disappointing to see him go, but you'd also understand if he did, you know. So it's one of those, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. We have had our first pre-season friendly of sorts. Burnley drew 3-3 with Iron Maiden, which
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd ever say those words on a podcast. But Chris, your lad bumped into brace scorer Jack Cork, didn't he? And you kind of messaged us to say Burnley have just played against Iron Maiden. It was a staff team, I should say, and the Iron Maiden team made up of Steve Harris, who is the band's leader and bass player and songwriter, I think, of Iron Maiden. I can't say I listen to much Iron Maiden, but made up of road crew and things like that. Our old mate Bobby Ball gets himself a run out for the staff team, but I mean, Chris, it's a bit of fun, isn't it? But it's quite nice. It's a good bit of publicity seeing Steve Harris swapping pennants with Jack Cork.
Well, yeah, it's terrific. I believe they played the co-op, haven't they, the weekend? And,
Yeah, I think they did 2 or 3 gigs there.
Yeah, it's good to have those sort of relationships, isn't it? And like I say, good for the reach of the club. The Maiden will have fans all over the world, won't they? And stuff. But if you're only drawing 3-3 with Maiden, I won't fancy taking on Metallica or someone like that. That'd be a tough tie with that one. Guns N' Roses, maybe. I think you might be able to turn them over.
Yeah.
White Snake away on a Tuesday night, something like that.
Too much hairspray going on there, isn't it?
But yeah, Woody, I mean, a bit of fun, but it was quite nice to see kind of Iron Maiden in their claret and blue West Ham kits. Shame it's they're all big Hammers fans, but I mean, it just shows, I guess, the reach. I mean, I think Steve Harris was saying they play all over the world. They played LA Galaxy and Bayern Munich, and he said Burnley felt like the kind of natural place to play a game in the Northwest. I mean, I'm sure they'd have had. He's obviously seen Little Al on the video playing in the quarry on the start of Mission to Burnley too, hasn't he? But it's it's quite nice that these people think of Burnley as a bit of a publicity stop and things like that. Are you much of a Maiden fan?
No. There you go. That's your answer. No.
Steve Harris, late 60s, I think, or at least mid 60s. So not the kind of probably
exactly.
He's not popping up on our scouting reports. I don't think
they were mega.
Too
mobile. Weren't they? Yeah. Back in the 80s, they were mega, weren't they?
Yeah.
Every album went straight in at number one, and it's I would say not my bag, but they can't argue with her career, can you?
No, millions and millions of albums. Yeah, 69, Steve Harris. I mean, I hope I'm still, doing whatever. It might be more walking football or Zimmer frame football for me at that age. But yeah,
Corky got 2, did he?
Corky got 2 apparently. Yeah.
No,
don't know who got the 3rd.
My lad's got his jersey. Big thanks to Corky for that one.
Oh, what a legend! What an absolute legend. Just talking about outgoings, we mentioned briefly kind of James Trafford, and we'll come on to that in a second. There has been a confirmed outgoing, Dara Costello, a bit of a surprise starter in Vincent Kompany's first league game at Huddersfield. He's left to join Wigan Athletic. We kind of expect a few more of these departures, don't we, Chris? I'm thinking the likes of probably Obafemi, probably one of the other goalkeepers, even regardless of whether Trafford stays or not. You'd expect Etienne Green to perhaps find pastures new. There's a few in that squad are probably in that position where they're going to be looking and perhaps looking at Championship and League One clubs. But good move for Dara Costello, isn't it? He seems to have been solid on his loan moves outside of Burnley.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, really highly thought of within the club as a footballer and as a young man. To me, he'll always have that on his CV. And he played in Vincent Kompany's, first league game in charge of Burnley, and yeah, he started adding goals to his game out on loan. You know, did a good spell at Stanley and one at Northampton, and all power to him. He was sort of. I was reading an interview with him, and he was sort of talking about that old. I'll say to mention his name again. There's your tick for the week. It's that old Sean Dychism, and there's no such thing as a bad loan.
Yeah.
That whether you have a good experience or a bad experience or in the middle, it's you know, it's all part of the learning process. And I think the way Wigan are heading with their purchases, and obviously Paul Mullen's gone through the door as well, I think that's a super move for Dara Costello, and that it shows you what a side that might well be pushing top end of that league this year. So it shows what they think as well to bring Dara into the fold. So, yeah, there'll be Obafemi is obviously one of those that's you know he's just not really had an opportunity, but not had a huge impact when in the chances he did have, and you wonder whether like people like Benson will get a sniff.
Yeah.
And like I say, Green came in as an England under-21 international, and he's got found himself behind Lanky and Trafford. So to say if Trafford moves on, Max Weiss has come in. Is he too young to start in the Premier League? Will Burnley sign another first choice goalkeeper ahead of him? Because you wouldn't imagine they'll throw Lanky or Etienne Green in there. So yeah, again, like the future. I mean, Delquar's going to be out the door, isn't he? And
You keep mentioning players I forgot about, Chris.
Yeah.
I mean, I was racking my brains about Delquar. You expected Delquar and probably an Ekdal to leave.
yeah,
I agree with you on Benson. I'm not 100% certain we'll see Benny in a Burnley shirt again. You know, I imagine there'll be a continental move for him.
Yeah, Masengo, people like that.
Masengo the goat.
I know you love
Oh,
Masengo,
forgot all about Masengo. God.
but
But we're going to see a lot of outgoings, aren't we, Woody? I mean, the squad is. I think someone posted up the Clarets. You know, the squad is already at this number, and you know, quite rightly, lots of posters said, look, there's a lot of players are going to be leaving.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a freshening up, but it's freshening up. We're kind of not getting rid of. That sounds bad, but players are going to be leaving who are perhaps never going to break into that squad, whereas in previous summers it's been wholesale changes of first team starters. And it feels a bit more of a kind of phased easing in of a new guard, doesn't it, this time?
Yeah. It seems more like normal services resume. The people who should be going look like they will be going, and the areas that we need strengthening look to be being strengthened, and that's what we kind of used to, rather than blowing the entire thing up and then throwing everybody out on loan and seeing how it all develops a year after. No, but all the names that we've mentioned, I mean, Dara Costello had all the attributes, apart from he had his boots on the wrong feet, didn't he? You know, that was the only slight problem. And if, like Chris has said, you know, he's improved that slightly, they've got a player on their hands of Wigan. He's got everything else going on. But yeah, Obafemi came as Teller's mate, didn't he? And then never really saw much after that. Delquar, and we won't be too sad to see these freeing up a few wages, will we? So it'll be all right.
Amdouni's the one, isn't he? I mean,
Yeah.
you'd expect Amdouni. There seems to be interest in Germany and Turkey, but you want some money for him. I just don't want to see this Weghorst scenario where you know you lose like a certain amount of his value per year of his contract, and he ends up leaving for a couple of £1 million in the final year of his deal. He just gets shut. If he's not going to be a part of the future of Burnley Football Club, just cut your losses and get shut. I mean, he's done very well with the Swiss again, hasn't he? Over the summer, in a decent record at Benfica. I mean, you wonder why. I mean, he's still technically a lone player, isn't he? So he could have gone. Could he not have gone with Benfica to the Club World Cup?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think the agreement is until July 1st, isn't it? So depending on their advancement, there may have had to have been another deal put in place for that. But
obviously, he's a Burnley player. He's an asset, so we either use him or just be on your way, son. But no, not to Turkey for a threepence and another loan.
Yeah. And Woody, I mean, that decision will be, you expect Scott Parker's decision, don't you? I think, from the way I mentioned this last week, Amdouni started last season. There didn't look to be any sulking. He was playing games and he scored, and he was playing a part. He probably was always going to be too good for the championship, and we'd look to move him on, and his agent would perhaps be pushing. But we get the impression he wasn't squaring up to Matt Williams like a certain player who got his move.
Exactly.
And was linked with a move back this summer, and we've got one of his defensive partners hopefully coming in. But I mean, Scott Parker is in a bit of a nice position where he can welcome back a player of Zeki Amdouni's undoubted quality, have a look at him, and then make a decision. If he don't fit the system, let's see if we can get him out. Let's see if we can get some money for him. But you'd expect that to be a Parker decision rather than a player decision, wouldn't you?
You'd hope so, wouldn't you? You'd like it to be controlled from the top a little bit more, and it seems to be that. It seems to be that way. And I mean, like we said last week, and like we said previously, he was touted as being one of the good guys. So I don't really have him down as being a sulker or a stropper or anything along those lines. It's just one of those weird kind of amounts, isn't it? With these weird deals these days where you don't quite know whether it's 15 million or 25, what is it that you're paying or whatever. And it's a strange figure, isn't it, that 20 million? It's quite a lot of money that you can get. We've seen that we can get these lads in for like 5 and on freeze and what have you. But you've still got the likes of these 20 million to recoup that you don't just want to let walk out the door, do you? And it's probably one of the, worst things about the VK era, that we did sign far too many of these players. Even if Trafford goes, even if we get 30 for him, we're barely making,
when you've paid
making
City
even. Exactly.
Their fee. And again, a lot of this is kind of, stage payments and things, but you ultimately still owe that money. And I think that's the one thing I miss about the old days, is when we actually, we knew that Liam Robinson had signed for club record 250,000.
Yeah.
You
Jet
knew
healed Liam Robinson.
you knew Ian Moore was the first £1 million Burnley. Yeah. Nowadays everything's undisclosed. The 2 announcements this week are undisclosed. We think they're around the €5 million mark, whatever that works out at in today's money. But it's it's a way of clubs being able to kind of hide behind a lot of this stuff, isn't it? Which is always frustrating.
You need Liverpool's fella. Anyone who can get 30 million for Kwanzaa, absolutely remarkable deal. No,
how's that happened? Exactly.
I see you're looking at all these sort of people talking about whatever for Esteve. That puts Esteve in that sort of ballpark, doesn't it? It's
Easily, yeah.
Again, Trafford. Someone was saying that the Kelleher deal's like a marker for Trafford. You're like, well, hang on a minute. Pickford went to Everton about 8 years ago for 30 million quid.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about markers, I think Brentford have done an unbelievable deal to get Kelleher in for like 18 mil or so. But Trafford, with everything he's got going for him, he's going to be England #1 at some stage, I think. It's his youth and everything, his physicality, his mentality, and his arrogance. I think at times, I think he's got to be like sort of 30 plus. If the richest club in the world can pay, I don't care about PSR. If they want him, they've got to pay for him.
Yeah. I do think, I think the board have been very smart. I mean, it's clear Trafford would like that move, and we're told that a gentleman's agreement has been made, according to Fabrizio Romano, that there's already agreed terms with Newcastle, which is something we never used to be allowed to do in the olden days. I know we used to go on, but fair play to the chairman and the board for going, we're quite happy if we'll let you leave, but the price has got to be right. You're not going for any less than we want. And, what you don't want is big clubs, Woody, bullying so-called smaller clubs and trying to upset a player. I think, as we saw last season, he's not going to see his arse, is he, Trafford? If he don't get his move, he'll just keep working until somebody comes in January and sets him up for the World Cup next summer.
Exactly. No, I mean he's holding quite a lot of cards, isn't he? Besides his gentleman's agreement, but it's like with the Kwanzaa thing. It's like we talk about 30 million for Trafford, and we know that he's going to be England's number one, probably sooner rather than later. But it's like that, that Liverpool tax works the opposite way, doesn't it? You've been a Liverpool player, you've won the Premier League. Had Kwanzaa been at any other club, he wouldn't be worth 30.
No.
If he'd have been at Ipswich or whatever, he wouldn't be worth 30. Whereas if Trafford had have been at Liverpool or whatever, he'd now be worth 70, 80, possibly the dearest keeper in the world. And, there's just that thing where they can pull our pants down a little bit, but it is nice to see that we're seemingly holding his place in the sand. So
Newcastle
we'll see what happens.
Sell Isak. Just sell Isak, then you can afford
Yeah.
Trafford.
Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly.
Job done.
Yeah.
Problem
Swap deal.
solved.
Yeah.
But this is the problem, isn't it, with the kind of upper end of the Premier League? Oh, we don't want to sell Isak. We'll get rid of Longstaff, or we'll get rid of this player, and we're not selling Isak. But they expect us to sell our big players to fund everything we want to do.
Yeah.
Sell the goalkeeper they bought for 20 million quid that they had no intention of playing just to clear PSR last summer.
Yeah. It's all a cartel, isn't it?
Anyway. If he's worth 20 million.
Exactly. Well stocked in the Newcastle goalkeeping department. We did chat about that on our WhatsApp group about, it's frustrating how, clubs stockpile goalkeepers, and we appear to be doing it with the signing of Max Weiss, but with one eye on a departure. That's all for this week. We will be back next week. I think Simon may have finished with this ridiculous American football soccer tournament, Club World Cup, whatever it is. I can't believe it's still going on. I've not seen a game for a while, but he's at Juventus versus Man City tonight, the lucky dog. He'll be back, we think, next week, but if not, it'll be a rotation of the from the BLN squad, back with more news, hopefully more signings and maybe some outgoings, and a look at how the first week of pre-season's gone as well. But until then, enjoy the rest of your week, and up the Clarets.
How many times do I have to tell you? Stop moaning!
Not going anywhere. I've never been happier, only to wake up in a whole different world.